Okay, still having some issues with my code. This program has become my life, all encompassing, and we're getting a little closer though. So I've created a bunch of printout statements again. I find this works better than the debugger sometimes. So, or at least in combination with the debugger. And so, bottom line is, my latest problem seems to be resulting from this method: populate chapters with excerpts from file. That again takes in the name of a file and does some stuff. Now, it's supposed to populate a chapter, which is a user defined function I've created. So, a chapter is a class. And each chapter contains excerpts from the applicable from that chapter that I'm going to use in the game, depending on the location you're at, to output certain excerpts. However, the excerpts weren't being outputted, and I wasn't sure why, and so I think I figured it out. Basically, after doing my print statements and I came into this method, I did some print statements before the outer loop. The outer loop in this method being, well, let's just go down here. So, the outer loop. So this is the method here. Populate chapter with excerpts, which is what this line indicates. We're in this function. And what was happening was, before the outer loop, I was just printing out the values of bool, val, and excerpt, which are declared here. And again, I'm just initializing them here with curly brace initialization, so it'll just initialize them to their default values. For a boolean, that is false, so that'll be a 0 or false, whatever you want to say. And for a string, it'll just be an empty string. So I expected that to print out, and that's what printed out. So for the bool value, 0 or false, and as you can see, an empty string for the excerpt. And then in the outer loop, so this is the before we got to the outer loop, and then when we went inside the outer loop, and why am I calling it the outer loop? Well, because there's a inner loop. So before the outer loop, once we get in the outer loop, I'm printing out the values, which is right here in the outer loop. The first string that I'm going to read in is going to be a game location. And the first time it's going to be Riverbank, and then the second time it's going to be, what's the second location? I can't remember. Where is it? It would be down here, Rabbit Hole. And then Twig Landing, that sort of thing. But anyway, so the first time, the first string will be a game location, and then a blank space, and why is that? Well, because let me just show you. Let's get that up. I believe locations, chapter locations. Okay. So this is why, because this is the file, so it reads in the first string, and then the next string is a blank space, and then it reads the excerpts. The excerpts go until a vertical pipe. Correction. The vertical pipe will be at the end of this excerpt, which is quite long. So you can see at the end of the excerpt there's a vertical pipe there. Then you'll read in a Boolean value until a vertical pipe, and then there's two vertical pipes. I kind of formatted this weirdly, but that's what's happening. So, where am I? So once we get in the outer loop, we create a couple variables, a vector of type excerpt called excerpts, and a string, a local string variable. And then I use the getLine function to continually read in the string from the file. So whatever I read in an entire line, and I throw it in this local variable. So the first time I print it out, it's going to be whatever game location is. So Riverbank the first time. And then when I read it again, because again I'm reading this over and over, when I read it again it will be, then I come down here. So the first time I just read in the game location, and I assign that string to location, variable called location, and then I call getLine again, expecting a blank line, right? So I just read it and don't do anything with it because it's a blank line. I'm printing it out for, again, the purposes of debugging. And then so before I enter the inner loop here, which is this loop here, again, so before entering the inner loop, and then when I get in the inner loop, I do a read, I assign string to excerpt, whatever string was to excerpt, and then I actually I'm seeing my so I in the inner loop, which is all this, I'm doing while and I'm calling the getLine function, but this time I'm passing in an optional third parameter, the third parameter being a vertical pipe, which the default delimiter for the getLine function is an X line, so it reads an entire line until next line. This time I'm setting it saying no, I want the delimiter to be a vertical pipe, so it'll read multiple lines, which is good because my file, which my excerpts text often goes multiple lines. For example, after I read in the first string, which is the game location, and then the second line, which is just a blank line, and then the third line, all the excerpts go until here. So there's multiple lines, and remember this ended with a vertical pipe right there. So it's multiple lines, so I need that ability, and so I've just changed the delimiter to read until a vertical pipe. So then, and this will work until getLine always returns kind of true if it's successful and false if it wasn't able to do it. So this will return true, and then right away I assign string, which is where the local variable in this method, remember, that I created early on, right here. It assigns that to excerpt, just like the first time I assigned it to location. Now I'm assigning it to excerpt, and then I call getLine again, still passing in that optional third parameter delimiter, so that I read until a delimiter, which for the third time will just read this line up until a delimiter, which is right there. It'll read true and this one vertical pipe, and then there's two vertical pipes left over. I could have probably used a different symbol, would probably be better, or some other method of doing this. And in case anyone's wondering, in case you're wondering why I didn't use just CSV, comma separated values, I just found this easier for me to parse and just kind of look at. So that's why. So I read in that the next line, I read until delimiter, which should be true. So this one should be the word true or false, depending on the excerpt. So this one's true, true, true. I mean, they're probably all true. This one's false, right? False, false. But it should read in whatever that Boolean value is as a string. So it reads that in, but what was happening was it was reading the rest. This is what I believe was happening. When I finished reading a line, like this line here, and I was reading to the next line delimiter, I ended up here. And then so then when I continued reading the next line, well, it would be this space. It would count the rest of this line. And then true. Or maybe one that's a little easier to see would be, I don't really see one, right here. So I would have read in the location, blank space, and then multi-lines until delimiter, which is right there. And then I would have read the rest of the line, which is all this space, until true, hit the delimiter. So you don't, so that's what I think was happening. And because of that, that's why when I printed before inner loop, and then when I came in the inner loop and I went string equals, and there's all this space, and the next line, then there's true. And even if this isn't space, it's still a next line character and then true. Because this might just be screwed up because of the my tabs. But either way, it's the next line is read before true, which doesn't equate to true, right? So then when I was doing a comparison in the original code, I was doing this read in line until that delimiter, and then I was just then comparing that string, because I was assigning this to str in the first place. I've changed it to format string now, but it was str, which is what I read, which should have been true or false or something. And I'm like, I was then comparing it, whatever I read in, whether it was true or false, I was comparing it to the string value for true. And therefore, if it was true, this would evaluate to a Boolean expression, true, and I'd assign that to the bool value. If it was false, this would evaluate to false. So basically, I was using this Boolean expression to take whatever I read in as a string, true or false, and assigning the Boolean equivalent to this. But it was never working. They were always false. Basically, through my original debugging printouts and debug last time, found out that everything was always false, which is why I was never seeing the excerpts when I entered a location. So I think, I haven't tried it yet, but I think this is the issue. So last I ran the code, I still had the other issue, which was, all this stuff. And then when I start the code, when I go somewhere, it doesn't print out the excerpt. See? Because the excerpt is false. So is show text is false. This basically evaluates to, hey, don't show the excerpt. And I think it's because this was always going to evaluate to false because of that next line thing. So now what I've done, and I'm hoping works, but we'll see, is I'm trimming the string, the input string, and making it lowercase. Although lowercase was an issue because I was already comparing it to this lowercase. But I'm doing that by, I've created a couple of user-defined functions that essentially do this for me. They're way at the bottom here. So this function right here trims, and I'm using the find first not of method and the find last not of method and passing in these delimiters. So a space, a tab, a new line, a carriage return, feed line. These two are kind of old, like vertical spacing and form feed. These are kind of old, but I included them because when I did research on everything online still includes them because they are still ASCII space characters. But this basically is using the this algorithm associated with the algorithm library to trim the thing, and I've just encapsulated a nice little trim method to kind of make it match what you would use in Java, where you just go .trim, except that I take in the string. And then I've also used the transform algorithm, so the where you pass in, the iterator begin to end, and starting from the begin, apply this lambda expression, basically converting every character as I iterate through the string to lowercase, and I've just called the method to lowercase. So again, to use these, I had to import the CC type and algorithm class at the top of my file. But let's just go there and show you. Oh, well, it would be in the header file actually. So I've had to make sure algorithm was included, which I think it already was, and CC type. Anyway, we're sidetracking quite a bit. So, in the inner loop now, hopefully, what I'm hoping is that by passing str, which again, I would use getLine to assign whatever I read, which should be true or false or something. I'm assigning that to str. I'm then calling that trim function I just created, and then that's being passed into the to lowercase function, and therefore I output it back to this local string variable formatted string. And then these are all just debugging printouts, but the actual thing that's happening is now I'm comparing the formatted string to true and assigning that to Boolean value, and hopefully this actually works now. So let's try that and see if we get something better than this. Oh, we've got a true a few times. I'm going to go right back to this. Look, we've got some trues and some falses, it looks like, so that's good. So we've got true sometimes, or false sometimes, 0, and true, so hey, this should work. Which means, if I enter somewhere, let's go east. And look, I get the excerpt now associated with the rabbit hole. And if I go, I don't want to do a thing. If I go west back to where I just came from, I get the excerpt that I didn't see originally because that's how I had it set up. And then if I go into the river, oh, I don't want to do a riddle. If I go into the river, I get some excerpt text from the novel. Yeah, I just didn't include anything. And then if I go south back into the thing, the excerpt doesn't show. Oh, do you want to hear riddle? No. The excerpt doesn't show because it's false. Because I don't want it to show if I come back in there. Just like if I go east now, it shouldn't show either, and it doesn't because it's false if I've already been there. I actually have to call the show method to show it. Oh, I keep forgetting about this riddle thing. I have to call the show method, and then it's still showing false, so I'll have to work that out. But then if I go south, again, I got some stuff. So anyway, again, the order of things is still maybe a little out of whack, but we're definitely solving some issues, so that's good. So basically, it was because I was comparing the whole crux of this issue that I've spent way too long explaining was that, and I should have kept that up just to show, was that I was reading in from a file, this file, and I was reading in a Boolean value as a string, true, false. I was reading in some values, whatever they happen to be, true or false, and I was comparing that. I was comparing that string to the string literal true or false, and hoping to return a Boolean value. But because my string was never just true or false, it had a white space in front of it or a next line or something. It wasn't, I wasn't comparing apples to apples. I wasn't able to compare it, so I just had to create these two little functions. A trim function that removes white space from the front and back of my input string, and a to lowercase function, which wasn't really needed in this case, but I figured I was using this sort of thing in other spots of my code, so I might just replace it with this. And they basically just are like wrapper functions for, methods from the algorithm library, like first not of and find last not of and the transform, and then I use two lowercase on a character. But anyway, that's the issues solved. Talk to you later.